Thank you for joining us all today. We are excited here to talk about comic book writing and self publishing. Today we have David Doub, Ben Napier, Taylor King, and Hector Rodriguez. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat and we will get to them after the first initial questions. So I'm going to introduce David Doub. David Doub is known for writing on the vampire horde book Dusk, the Victorian supernatural comic The Trials and Tribulations of Miss Tilney, and also on the 80s retro action hit Aerobicide Extreme Ninja Workout. David is a proud member of Shonuff Studios. Ben Napier is a musician, producer turned comic creator based in Fort Worth, empowered by the pandemic pause and laid off from his music industry job when the lockdown went into effect. He launched BG Comics in 2020 with science fiction writer Taylor King. Taylor King is a Texas artist, writer living in East Fort Worth. He also works as an art and frame restorer at Dow Art Galleries and the Culture District. In 2020, Taylor joined friend and collaborator Ben Napier to write and produce comics, animation, and more. Lastly, we have Hector Rodriguez III. He is the creator of El Peso Hero and co-founder of the Texas Latino Comic Con. El Peso Hero is a comic book heavily influenced by the modern day challenges people from both sides of the US-Mexico border face and is centered on El Peso Hero, a rogue hero who is standing up against Mexico's cartels, corrupt officials, and human traffickers. It has been one of the most internationally talked about Latino superheroes in decades and has garnered attention and praise from the Latino community and has been featured on American Way magazine, Univision, CNN, Telemundo, NPR, CBS, NBC, and countless of other media sites worldwide. So welcome everybody, and let's get started with the questions. And I'll start with you, David. We'll just go into line. So first question. Can you talk about some of the earliest comics you remember reading growing up, and did they have any impact on the types of stories you like to tell today?
Yeah, no, I thought about this question because it's funny. I started on superhero comics, but I branched out. So from that, so I don't really write superheroes now, but I noticed thinking about the question that I have been influenced by that, like the melodrama. I'm sure everyone can talk about the old superhero comics were so filled with melodrama. And I remember this one distinctively. It was like one of the few comics that I had that I kept rereading over and over to where, it was all crinkly and, I don't even think they grade stuff that low. And it was this Superman story where he was pushing an asteroid and just had this weird device that split him in half, basically him and Clark Kent. And it was all this, there wasn't really much action in the story. It was just, Clark Kent and Superman noticing they could be separate. And they just kind of, and it was more drama than that. And I noticed the drama aspect is what kind of influenced me a lot over the years, because I've gone into, I read European comics, from heavy metal to all the black and white indie boom, if anyone's old enough to remember that. And a lot of it was, filled with all that great over the top, basically melodrama. And I'd say that thinking back now with, better hindsight, I was like, oh yeah, no, it was definitely all of the, yes, I love the action, but I love the over attack. Not only does there action, but, you feel not just anguish for, something happened. You feel crushing anguish, or, it hurts more than the strongest blow that your enemy can throw at you. So yeah, that's what I would say in a nutshell.
All right. And how about you, Ben? What were some of the earliest comics you remember reading, and did they have any impact on the stories you like to tell? Oh, you're muted, I think.
The earliest comics that I remember reading are like the 60s and 70s Marvel, like the Jack Kirby Captain America and the early like Steve Ditko and Stan Lee Fantastic Four and stuff like that. Looks like my audio level's a little low. But all that stuff definitely had a big impact on kind of what I dig about comics and, what I'm about comic wise, kind of, extreme not so much extreme action, but just like kind of left field sci-fi stuff.
Yeah.
I really loved all the kind of just the zany.
It's funny you say that because I can see the Ditko, crazy alien bizarre style and your alien stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Just the kind of the air of anything being possible was a big part of what drew me to comic books and kind of kept me reading. It definitely the turn that comic books took in the 90s where in a lot of ways everything just became like more gritty and violent and visceral and direct. Sort of turned me off, honestly, and I kind of took a long sabbatical from comics and am now excited to try and reconnect with a lot of that that early 60s and 70s energy and fantastic and zany sci-fi vibes.
Cool. And how about you, Taylor?
I'm probably the comics baby of everyone here tonight. Just I think I'm coming from it from more of a cartoon side. David mentioned heavy metal. I have a distinct, and it definitely influenced our comic that Ben and I put out. I have a distinct memory of seeing the heavy metal movie on Toonami. And when I was at my grandma's house, I was maybe like 11 or 12 or something. And, like you're sneaking, watching the thing you're not allowed to at home. So I was, up late watching Cartoon Network and they played heavy metal. And I loved it so much and went and found, I think I probably found heavy metal at the Fort Worth Library. And also, I found weird stuff. I was aware of superheroes, but I always liked the weirder stuff, like the Sandman was one of mine. I had almost no real reference to comics, but I found the Sandman and I was really into what the story was there and just sort of the archetypal information. As far as influencing the comics we're making now, being an early reader was the big part of that. Like especially the old science fiction, like Arthur C. Clarke and Asimov, and all those guys really influence sort of the stories I like to tell.
And Hector, how about you? What were some of the earliest comics you remember reading, and did those stories have an impact on the stories you like to tell today?
Yeah, definitely. One of the things that I loved growing up reading is flipping through Mad Magazine and seeing the art of Aragonés. And for me, that was very impactful because that's him being a Mexican of Spanish descent. I was really able to connect to, and just seeing the very expressive artwork. Also, living, being a kid from the 80s and then early 90s and seeing the wave of independence from Marvel, Todd McFarlane, creating Spawn, Image, and I was a young kid and seeing the grit and the maturity. It really spoke to me early on and later on in my professional career, learning the art and learning the history behind it. And, being admired by these trailblazers of breaking away from the norm, from the system, creating their own art, Historietas, Lucha Libre. I was a kid from the border, so I really had a great opportunity to consume media from Mexico and the United States from both worlds. So I consumed the best of both worlds in the city of Mount. And so I was, I was very influenced early.
All right. So we'll move on to the next question.
with a lot of
All right, so we'll move on to the next question. I'll start with you, Ben. Can you talk about some of your early comic book work? And it doesn't have to be comic book work; it could be any kind of creative work, and how that work has related to what the comic book work that you do today, and how that has evolved. And
Oh, it sounds like Hector might not be able to hear us.
yeah, Hector, are you okay?
He's in a time delay. He's 5 minutes behind us.
Well, I mean, talking about my early comic work versus now, it's a pretty thin slice of my creative life. But I would say in that time, it's been about, at this point, it's probably been about a year and 6 months of making comic books.
Yeah.
And in that time, my take on everything in my process has evolved quite a bit. Thanks mostly to all the different artists that I've worked with and the different people that I've, commissioned work from and kind of studied with. We've had, at this point, being a year and 6 months deep, I've probably commissioned 10 or 12 different artists, and I've done sequential work with 3 different artists. And so everybody's take on it and everybody's sensibilities have kind of started to inform, what I'm about and what I'm doing and what I'm trying to achieve, for sure. So I've had one comic, it's like a pitch comic that I've had go through 2 different artists. And so just observing, that same process filtered through 2 different artists has been really eye-opening. Talking about, people have just different sensibilities of pacing, and people have different, sensibilities about, whether they're really trying to draw, pretty panels versus informative panels, you know what I mean? And whether they're really trying to, get to the bottom of the story and develop the characters, within the panels as well as they're developing the story and things like that. The evolution of my, comic process has been pretty brief and pretty thin, but there's so much work out there. There's so many great artists out there right now that it's really pretty easy to dig in and, and find people to learn from.
Yeah. And how about you, David? You've worked on a couple of different comic projects. How is the evolution of your work?
Yeah, because when I started out, I was trying to be clever. And I was like, there's kind of a stigma with indie comics of like, oh, don't get issue 1, you'll never see issue 2, either because, you're too small to get it out, or, the, distribution dries up. So I'm going to be super smart. And I took material and I gathered it up into graphic novels, but then I made them more manga size. So I thought, I'm super clever. I'm making graphic novels, I'm making mangas, I'm going to sell it to everybody. It's like, no, all I did was, confuse some potential readers and up the production time and effort, like big time. Like another thing I did is I would do different stories, and I go, oh, well, if it takes 1 artist X time to do it, if you have 4 artists doing it at this, doing different stories at the same time, you'll get them done, 4 times faster. Nope, you get it 12 times slower, just because you have so much more you're juggling and having to, get through and all of that. So yeah, at the beginning, I thought I was, smarter than everyone else. And now I've learned to work on smaller projects and one shots and focus more quality and, not simpler, but more under my control than, just going, I'll make big, giant 150-page epics, which I managed to do. But, that's why my output would be like maybe 1 every year, 1 every 3 years at my worst case. And it was all like, but that doesn't really, help because with like Ben was saying, there's so much stuff out there, you're just going to get crowded out of people's memories. So I've learned to control my production a lot since then. And I know that's not the sexiest, like, oh, I've learned to write this or that better. I've learned not to, be like Cookie Monster and eat all the cookies at a time. Eat one cookie at a time. Nom, 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 nom.
Cool, man. So I'll ask the question to Taylor. Can you talk about some of the early comic book work or any creative work and how that writing or creative process has evolved to what it is today?
Well, like I will just reiterate, Ben and I have been making comics together this past year or so, and he started on that pitch comic before we started our Glurk and Bow stuff. So that was really sort of, I mean, I may have like tried to draw cartoons or something in a sort of sequential way when I was a little kid. I mean, I'm an artist as well. So there's visual aspects that you can bring to it, like I'm able to visualize a panel. I maybe can't do all of the art myself, but as the writer, you need, it's really helpful to be able to visualize what you actually want to see. I think as far as influences, like again, just like cartoons and movies and TV shows and all the books that I've read, I just bring all of that and try and focus on making it a good story and picking up like specific comic book sensibilities, like, specific production stuff, like putting the talk balloon on the left, you start on the left and then move to the right, like little things like that you can come up on the way. But if you don't really have the sense of how to tell a story, I think that's sort of like the base level of what you need.
This is funny because I actually heard Taylor answer this question informally to somebody a few weeks ago, and the informal answer is basically outlining.
Yeah.
Just from our early works to our later works, one of the biggest differences in the creative process has just been, relying a little bit more heavily on outlining.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Like my first draft of the Glurk and Bow issue 1 was a screenplay. It just was. And our artist came back and was like, listen, you can't have like more than one movement like in one panel. And, it's like, oh, well, of course, like it makes sense now. But if you've never done it, like, I mean, you could look up, watch all the YouTube tutorials and stuff, but I think
FredVanLente.com.
yeah, I think that learning from the people you're making the stuff with is another good thing to.
Yeah, because you'll find different artists will process it differently. I know some artists who've been in it forever and they're like, just give me the roughs. I can figure out the pages and the paneling. Just give me the quick beats for the page and I'll figure out the paneling and the breakdowns. And because traditionally I will just break it all down, not because I want you to follow it slavishly, because I want you to be able to go, oh, this is what David is looking at. You can move it around as you see. I just want to make it clear. But I have had some artists going, why are you describing the stuff that is not in the panel? So it's there. That's all, so it affects it. Because I remember a writer was talking once, is like, you got to tell the artist things that the reader doesn't know. Like say, the king's hiding in, rags and all that, you still got to give the artist that knowledge so he can make his bearing a little bit differently. Because even though the reader doesn't know, the artist needs to know that stuff. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump in.
Not at all.
That's great.
And I'll ask Hector the question. Can you talk about some of your early comic book work and how your writing and creative process has evolved from your first comic and to what you do now, to your last one?
Well, definitely there's a sense of maturity. When it comes to art, I get so focused on the fundamentals and the part of it that I've gone to a point where I can trust myself, and and for me, I've done a lot of, personal indie stuff, but when it comes to, El Paso Hero, the hardest thing is when it comes to writing and having somebody else take a crack at it. It's that trust. I've grown. I wasn't prepared, when it comes to the artistic part of comic book, of indie, and sharing your own personal project with others. The artistic, it's easy, it's fine, just because that it's going to be in their style, their vision per se. But when it's a little bit more personal and deeper, when it comes to you as a writer, handing over the reins, either through a comic, or if you're talking about something bigger like film or show, and that's where you come. There's this whole different level of trust, as well as you're really opening up yourself up.
All right.
Oh, one quick nitpick is I wanted to say Hector said something bigger like film. I'd argue film and show has more money involved, but nothing is bigger than comics.
Of course, David.
Yes.
I'm just saying, it's like it's just you know what I meant, man.
I know what you meant. I'm just saying, for everyone, comics first, everybody else is a second, or that
Just
third
to
gold
set
medalist
it,
guy.
we have
going,
to set the market. We have to set the market.
Yes.
All right, so we'll
Stay
move
on
on to
messaging.
question number 3. I'll start with you, Taylor. Comics is largely a collaborative effort, typically involving a writer, sometimes working with an editor, and a couple of different artists. So how does one go about finding and creating a good team of collaborators to work with?
Well, I can only speak from my experience, or mine and Ben's. For Glurkenbow, we did get extremely lucky with the artists that we chose. We did do a little bit of an audition process on Reddit and other stuff, just looking for just the right fit for artists, for style and everything. And we also did take into account like how they communicated with us, or how they interpreted what we did. Is Ben and I came up with a paragraph describing a page or a panel or something, and we sent that out, and we paid for a page just to see their interpretation of what that information was. And we found Tom and we found Jimmy G to do our inks and colors respectively. And we used that experience to kind of move forward in trying to find people, like say like, okay, well, we're not going to always get a Tom level person, but we kind of know what we want. Like we want someone that we can talk to easily, someone that's like easy to work with. And he is in Australia. So if he wasn't able to communicate, there wouldn't have been anything at all, but he could do it. And it was like flawless almost. And we just did back and forth a lot of Skype calls. But organically, Ben and I, for this first project, fell into kind of Ben taking like an editor's role. And because the original story idea was sort of based off of an idea I had, I wrote most of the treatments in pretty much, would refer and say, Ben, can you check this out and make sure I didn't, do something weird, and talk through like story ideas and, changing stuff. But organically, we kind of fell into these spots and figured out how to come up with a finished product, and kind of taking those lessons of, you're going to need to take, constructive criticism and you're going to need to, like Hector was saying, like I had to learn a lot of that, like, okay, trust someone with your personal idea, because that's just a hard thing. And it's different, like when you are giving it to someone else, because for me, as an artist, I'm my own worst critic. But when it's someone else that could possibly be the critic as well, that's like a whole other, that's a whole other game. But I don't know, it's definitely, I think everyone would say this, like it's a case by case thing. And that's sort of how, I mean, maybe you really love someone's artwork and you just kind of want to get the work from them, but they're really hard to work with, and it may just be worth it to you to get the finished product out. But that's kind of, you just kind of have to take it as it comes. I don't know what everyone else would say.
All right. How about Ben? Do you want to add anything to that? What Taylor had to say?
Muted.
You're muted.
Finding and creating a good team of collaborators, basically comes down to, achieving anything, right, comes down to the time, money, work matrix, right? So you got to put the time in to kind of like find your community, or find, where people, find people who are doing what you need done, right? And then you have to work on building that relationship with them and making them interested in, working on your project one way or another. And so you're either going to, spend the time to talk to them, informally, and kind of get to know them in a social media community, or you're going to offer them money to work on your project. And how well everybody works for you, right? And how well they fit with you is going to kind of come down to that. Like, can you afford them on the money side? Do you and they have the time in common to work together? Like for us, most of our collaborators are overseas, and so we wind up at 4 a.m., or up very late, trying to talk to them, since they're 12 hours away from us, on the clock. And then the time, right? Like, do you, or the work on your end, right? Like, are they producing work at the level that you need, relevant to the amount of time that you have to work with them, right? Like, do you have a lettering guy that is giving you a great page rate, but then you have to kind of like work with him, like do 2 or 3 revisions before the letters are done, right? So it's like, he's, sometimes you have a collaborator that is giving you more, value than they're costing you money wise. And sometimes you have collaborators that are costing you so much in time that, the rate that you're paying them is not really working in your favor, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Getting what you pay for.
Yeah.
And I'll put the question on Hector. So sometimes you work with a couple different artists. So how do you go about finding the artists that you like to work with, and building a good team and collaboration?
For me, it's definitely about the story, right? And what best fits, and so I've had the privilege to work with different artists, from Chono Studios, from Argentina to Mexico, to some other artists like Canon Way. And so each project, calls a certain artist. I know with one of their biggest collaborations was our horror story anthology. So I actually had David be the writer. And so, we had a artist friend, and we had a colorist, and, I did the lettering, and so it's definitely, it all depends on the story. And so, yeah, last year during our COVID quarantine, I did not have the capital, but I really wanted to tell a story. And so I put pencil to paper and did the art myself, and that, when old, just like I haven't done like in issues 1 and 2 of El Paso Hero. And so there are moments and times that you just have to do it yourself, as a creator. you know, there's pros and cons. You know, there's some, I have some fans that prefer me doing the art, you know, but me as a creator, I know that's a, you know, there's a balance, you know, it's especially if, you know, depending on the style and the story you're telling.
Right.
But
How
yeah,
about you, David? Do you have any?
Yeah, a quick
advice?
thing that reminds me of a quick comment I hear at shows where it's like, oh, it's hard to find a creative team and all that. And they're like, why don't you just draw it yourself? It's like, yes, I'll go master another discipline on top of writing and all that. Because, you know, I just split my brain like that. And that's just the jovial thing is you got to figure out your strengths and weaknesses and all that. And I can draw a little bit, but like you know, my strength in writing is a lot stronger. And I've learned more to collaborate more, as in write stuff for the artist I'm knowing and going for, or, you know, with Show Enough Studios, like I knew I was helping Terry out. So I was writing for his art. So I wasn't doing a story I would do. I was doing what he would do with my own spin. Obviously, I was not like I am Terry, but, and I've learned that with more, you know, I've written stories with artists in mind and so forth, and to make it easier, but that's because I built up a relationship, because it is hard with artists, because it is hard to find someone new off the bat and all that, because it is, you don't know, you got to test them. I always have them like draw a panel or two. It's like, let's just see if you can, you know, how basic you can, you know, if you got the basic gist, because it is hard to build up a team. And it is, like I was talking earlier, it's the production value. So you got to, you know, you can't skimp places, because I have done that to where I'm like, oh, I spent all the money on the penciler, or so the pencils are great, so I'll just get an easy inker. It's like, oh no, it shows a lot. And so and I've had like big folks mentions like the lettering I always hire, you know, the overall coloring package, that it looks like a slick package, because you can't just be all like, oh, I spent it all on, you know, good art or what have you. And Ben brought up a point that is known for even Marvel and DC does that, and it's just a simple way of not exploiting, but benefiting from the global economy to where a lot of artists are out of South America or the Philippines or Asia, because a dollar, you know, is all of a sudden worth 100, you know, in their dollars, or 1,000 or whatever. You'll see a lot of those creators from even Marvel and DC down to us guys is because of just the, you know, the dollar to their dollar ratio. And that brings its own interesting things, because if you mention it's like, oh yeah, it's like a typical Texas town. It's like, never been to Texas, never been to America. I do not, you can't, you got, and I've learned with that is to add references a lot more. References are big. Mind you, nowadays you just got to do Google link. You're not, you know, like Google Images, or like, here's a bunch of URLs, here are some references. Even then you got to watch it, because like I remember one, I go, oh, you know, kind of like Molly Ringwald's. Like, sure enough, she was dressed like Molly Ringwald through the whole comic from 16 Candles, because that's the picture I showed. So I'm like, fair enough, but you know, and that's the tricky thing is you'll find that with being doing comics at our level and all that, because if you go to a publisher or whatever, it's like, no, you got to have your own art team. It has to be finished, or you're going to have to finish it. We're not doing that, because I see a lot of writers who go, here's my script. Like, last night, go assemble the team and build it. So you got to know how to do all that and build that and then give it to them. So so whenever you're becoming a writer, you're becoming a production manager, an art director. And that's one of the reasons I joined up with Show Enough Studios. They're stronger artists and all that. And they're like, David, you're a horrible art director. It's like, yes, but I am free. I am the free art director.
All right. So we'll move on to question number 4. And I'll start with you, Hector.
I had one thing, Raphael.
Yeah, go ahead.
At number 3, one of the best, you know, one of the biggest points I feel like I have about finding a good creative team, it's just finding a team that likes working together.
Right.
If you have everybody on your team is excited by everybody else's work, I feel like it's like a sort of a can't fail situation. So a little bit of that goes a long way. If you got somebody on your team that's like, oh, this guy's terrible, then you're probably not, you know.
Or they're gun for hire, so their art is technically good, but they don't have that passion.
Mhm.
that someone else may have. They're not into it. You can see that.
Yep.
Yeah, I feel like forming a creative team is kind of like forming a band in a certain way. You know, you got to have the right personalities and the right vision of where the thing's going to go, right?
Oh yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly, and like I even have a spiel about that, so you can summon that spiel at any time.
All right, so we'll move on to question number 4. And Hector, so after a book has been completed, how do you go about getting your book distributed? What are some of the avenues people can take to get their books into people's hands?
Definitely, just hitting for me early on, and just hitting the comic books in, con scene, as, as much as you can. And, being open, going to special, smaller, the better, the more intimate, if your story is okay or good, good, it's just, that definitely word carries out, for me. El Paso started as a webcomic just because of the accessibility of it, right? And it's all about being consistent, having that consistent work. First of all, you're doing it for yourself. If you love the story, you believe in it, you can continue on regardless of who picks it up. If 1 or 2 people pick it up, that's amazing. That's awesome. But as long as you're having fun, having a good time, and really excited about telling that story, continue on. Distribution, there's so many different methods. Digital distribution, I see that more and more being, just because of cost production, and through my own venues, I see that, especially last year, during COVID, where a lot of things shut down, and so there was definitely a pivot towards digital distribution. DRM free PDFs, Comixology being one, having your own venues and your own website as well.
All right. And how about you, David? Do you have any suggestions on how people can do that?
Oh yeah, I mean, I can go old school if you want and talk about how Diamond works, which is becoming less poignant than it used to be, considering there's was it Diamond does everyone but DC. DC is with Lunar, and Marvel is with Penguin. Is it the Penguin or is it
Penguin.
Random? Penguin. Sorry, you think DC would go with the Penguin, but they're not thinking of the creative things, because that's a whole archaic mess too. And that's the trick is, Hector put it, I think hit a nail on the head, as con sales seem to do the best because you make that personal connection and you really sell it. Not only are just buying it, they're buying a piece of you, or they're buying that part of you and all that. That's the one downside I've noticed from digital sales is there's just everything everywhere, and it's so much white noise. And I'm not just talking about comics, I'm just talking about content on the internet. I mean, if you're not competing just with me and Hector, you're competing with, can I have cheeseburger and TikTok and, Pornhub and all that. How are you going to, make yourself known and all that? And it seems archaic that shows are still, the best way to do it. But if you look, like, especially here in Texas, actually, I argue with this guy. He runs a great resource website for cons, but he's all like, keep it 100. I'm like, no, that's too many. But it shows the demand is there and people want to interact, get it, all that. And so, because there's so many other ways. Some stores do consignment, where they will try to sell the book and they'll take a smaller cut. Some stores will, buy it outright, but that means you're literally knocking on doors. So again, it's still pretty old school. And I've tried to work with so many smaller distributors, but they kind of just, it's hard to distribute stuff because you got to take it at a deep enough cut to then sell it at a cut to the other person. And then for us, it doesn't help much, because if they buy it and they just put it on the shelf, again, you're there not only with all the other great comics, you're there with the pop vinyls sitting there with the magic cards. And some poor clerk who's getting paid minimum wage, unless he knows your book, he's not going to be able to hand sell it. So, and I don't expect him to. And I can't, we can't be at every shop. So it's, and I'm not trying to say discouragingly, just to realize it is hard. And almost it feels like you're hand selling each and every copy. Not saying you can't do it, like Diamond has a distribution policy, has a submission policy. Comixology has a submission method. You can do it through Amazon too, which is kind of redundant if you get Comixology, but and there's other web portals too, and you can do web comic hosting, or people, bigger comic creators even making their own platforms. Like there's recently Substack, which I thought was just more of a newsletter software like MailChimp or something. It's like, no, we're putting content and all that. And all of a sudden, there's like, 10 of the biggest, mainstream comic writers sitting there generating content. And that's, again, and that's one of the biggest things about comics altogether is there is no, you do this, you do that, results. It is literally, you can do this 20 things, you can do these 30 things, you can do these 40 things, and I can do the same thing Ben does, and we will get totally different results. Even if we even do it exactly in the same voice and I dye my hair green, it will not, does not work the same. It's maddening. I will do the same thing that I did, and all of a sudden it does it totally differently. And you're like,
And I'll ask Ben the question. So what are some of the ways you've gotten your book out there into other people's hands? I know you guys did Kickstarter, right?
Yeah, we did. Kickstarter is used for comics in lots of different ways. The sort of original method for kickstarting a comic is to raise basically all of the production costs on Kickstarter and then make the book. And then once it's done, send it out to people. We actually used Kickstarter to fund the print run of the book, which was actually a pretty small print run. And so we sort of used the platform more like a pre-sale platform. And so the wait for our book was not, 6 or 7 months to a year, which is sort of like a typical, full production turnaround time for a book going through Kickstarter. We shipped our books out about 2 months after the Kickstarter was over. But yeah, there are lots of digital distribution methods, and they sort of, the value of them is sort of dependent on your following and your social media and sort of your audience. That's what I should have said the first time. So basically there are platforms like Webtoon and Tapas that are that have large communities around them, right? With people just going and discovering content. And so we've been told by a lot of people that we should have started there. And then there are formats like Comixology and Global Comics, which we're a really big fan of. Global Comics is sort of like the indie alternative to Comixology, which is, of course, an Amazon product now. But those platforms are way more, content driven. It's like, people that want the next, the new Garth Ennis comic are going to go look for it on Comixology, whereas people that are, into the Adventures of Jonesy and Dr. Long and Glurkenbow are going to get steered to Global Comics. Independent creators are going to steer people to Global Comics to to look at their content. And so again, all the digital distribution platforms basically come down to that audience. Each one of them has kind of like a small niche crowd that hangs out on that platform. But with the exception of things like Webtoon and Tapas that really kind of invest in maintaining traffic, on their site because of the content being serialized and being distributed all the time. With the exception of those, most of them are basically, people are going there for a certain kind of content, because they've been then led there or pulled there by something else.
I would argue though that Webtoons and Tapas though have a certain not house style, but there is there's a type of comic that tends to float up to the top of those, and it is that more anime manga styling. I know there's others there and all that, but I've noticed that and again, that's with any platform. They all kind of,
they all have different demographics as well.
Yeah, and the audience kind of dictates what they want to see. So,
right. Yeah, I would totally agree with that. It seems to me that lots more, kind of LGBTQ stories and things like that tend to thrive on Webtoon and Tapas and really pick up momentum, and then take that to Kickstarter and then capitalize on Kickstarter to make print runs of their products and things like that. that's a model that I've definitely observed going on. But there's lots of websites like Comic House and Buy Small Press, and there's sort of like new ones, popping up all the time, where people are just trying to aggregate content and get resources together and sort of like, oh, we're gonna build our comic scene, we're gonna build this thing around this platform. It's a lot, like a lot of other entertainment industries, it's kind of very, very stratified and almost click oriented, and there's different pockets of people and different communities and different artists that have gravity and sort of like develop their small microcosms of the digital industry. And so that drives people to like David said, the cons, the conventions as an alternative to the direct comic store market and to the digital market. Conventions are a really great way to get your book into the hands of people who are excited about comic books. And that's what can be sort of the hardest part about being a creator and just breaking onto the digital scene and being like, hey, I'm really excited about this comic book. Who wants to read it? And on most social media, it's like crickets. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Most of the comic book social media and the people that are excited to talk about comics on social media are on Twitter. And most of the people who are real life people who are liable to get really excited in your face when they see your physical comic book in front of you on a table, those people are going to comic conventions. And so really reaching those people, is about meeting them halfway at that, in that venue. Because like David said, getting comic books into local comic stores is really, really hard, just in general. And that like there are many barriers to entry, like creatively and, business wise. And then getting your book, on a local level, like going to your local comic shop and saying, which is great because it's how I met Raphael, saying, I'm making a comic. Would you like to sell it? The answer is usually no thanks. Because their incentive is just very low, just the way that the industry is structured. Unless you can convince them that without a lot of their help, dozens of people are going to show up and buy this book, they're probably not that interested in taking the book. We have our books in 3 local stores, 2 of which are a chain that, me and Raphael actually have both worked for. And so we have the personal connection with. And then the 3rd store is a store that I opened in Mansfield this summer. So it's tough. There are easily 30 comic shops in DFW. And, having called most of them, the response to even a comic that, I'm really proud of was like, yeah, cool. That's great. Good job. No, thanks.
All right, Taylor, did you want to add anything to that? What Ben just said?
No, nope.
All right.
Nice.
I think he said it all right. So I think we probably have time for maybe one more question. Let's see. I'm deciding which question to ask. Two questions.
I'm just saying question 2. I'm voting 2.
Make up a new one off the top of your head. Totally. Make it up.
All right. So here's my question. What's the next big? I'll ask this to Taylor first. What's the next big project you're working on that you want viewers to have on their radar?
Oh, well, I'll just say we're gonna complete Glick and Bow. We've made the ultimate mistake of making our first thing a long, extended run, large story, and so now we have to follow through and finish it. But we're also talking. I was thinking about this when we were talking about making references to get information across, especially with people overseas. There's a Russian comic artist that we've been buddies with for a while, Maxime Mel, and I am finishing up a one shot for him, and it's Marines getting shot out into space by a government alien, agreement, secret deal. So with Max, we've had to say like, okay, you know, all these like Vietnam era like war movies and stuff, or like, you know, would send him like a clip of MASH to show him like what the green uniform and stuff looks like. It's because he doesn't have the same like cultural reference that we do. So it's like, okay, let's send him all the, you know, make sure that we have our outline, we have our script, but then we also have a document that's like reference photos, you know, just showing all kinds of stuff like that. So that's the next thing that I think that's on our docket, because we had to push back our Glurk and Bow production for a little bit. So we wanted to get in, and because we have this long series that we're trying to finish, we want to do, you know, 8-page stories, you know, just to get out there and just get more stuff finished. If we did, that was sort of our original idea with Glurk and Bow, was to make it a one shot, and just to sort of prove the concept, prove the idea that we could sort of do it. And it was just for me and Ben really at first. And then of course I'll take all of the blame of making it a giant story. So.
You just wrote a story that everybody wanted to continue. The vibe in the band was too good. We couldn't stop.
I've read the second issue today of Glurk and Bow, and I really enjoyed it. So yeah, I'm gonna miss it until it's back.
Sweet.
What about you?
Hopefully not too long.
Yeah. What about you, Ben? Are you working on anything right at the moment?
Taylor and I are working on the abduction of Fire Team 9 together. And it's funny because as we're doing like the pre-production on that book with Maxime Mel, Maxime and I are finishing up a pitch comic adaptation of a novel that we're doing. It's the first comic that I started during the lockdown. It's that project that I did with 2 different artists, but we're kind of like rounding third base, and we're almost done with it so that we can pack it up and send it to the author and his publisher and basically say, that awesome book you wrote, it should be awesome comics and we should make them.
Yeah.
But so that's kind of where we're at right now, is working on the abduction of Fire Team 9 and finishing up that pitch comic, and then getting things ready for the next Kickstarter for Glurk and Bow #3, which should be starting pretty soon.
All right.
Yeah.
How about you, Hector? What have you been working on, and what do you want to let people know, put on their radars?
I know that I have various projects in the oven per se. They will see the come about next year, but I mean, I'll stick with El Paso Hero. You know, we just finished the 10-year story arc, 10th year anniversary, and so we should be seeing that soon in November. For our folks that pledge on the Kickstarter. And right now, and then continue on with the next story arc, plus your Sicario War. And I don't know, David, are you there?
I'm here. I'm always here.
Can we talk about Texas Latino Comic Con, how that may be coming back?
Yeah, sure. I thought it was. Yeah. You keep telling what?
Well, yeah,
do a reveal and take it back.
Right. Yeah. And so our David and I's Texas Latino Comic Con should be coming about hopefully by the end of October. Going back virtual, second year virtual. We'll have some great panels, free for the whole world, and so that's our up and coming. Check it out.
All right. What about you, David?
I'm kind of like Hector. I always have stuff in the pipe because I know how long it takes and all that. So I always got to have stuff in the pipe. So then it looks like I'm productive. It's like, no, I loaded that, I salted it, if you would. The Texas Horror Anthology should be coming out soon. The Kickstarter is, we got all the art mostly done. Just got to put it all together. I have a one shot of Miss Tilney coming out through Source Point. So that looks exciting. And I got that artist working on another story for that. And I got working on a couple other things for a couple other artists and creators that I wanted to work with. And so it's just a kind of a horse race to see which one can get out of the pipeline first. It's like racing snails sometimes. Go, go.
True story.
All right. So I guess I'll close. Thank you all for agreeing to be part of this panel. I hope
Hey,
that.
Can I interrupt for a second? You have
Sure.
questions in the chat.
Oh, we do.
I answered them via text, but yes.
Oh, is it the post-apocalyptic Victorian romance?
No, what is your favorite genre to write? And Taylor, I used a one-word answer, and he had to use all the other words.
I had to do a funny answer.
Yes.
Now you got to explain yourself.
Yeah.
Well, no, I will say actually instead, a favorite one that I'm working on right now is a Dream Logic, real personal story where it's sort of like a kid hero Dream Logic story. So I think that's my favorite one right now.
I guess that does count as a whole genre. I hate when Dream Logic interrupts like good The Flash story arcs. It's like my big pet peeve is like Dream Logic is like the go-to gimmick for DC books. We're just like, oh no, we don't know what to do. They're gonna have to go fight for someone's mind. It's like all the time. But our Dream Logic book will be cooler than that because it won't be interrupting a superhero story to be a Dream Logic story. It'll just be a Dream Logic story.
Wow, Stan Lee.
Yeah, from the grave. All right. So what about you, David? What's your favorite genre to work in?
Mine is horror, and not just because I grew up in the 90s, you know. Kurt Cobain killed himself when I was in high school, and counselors had to check us, and we were like, what? And, you know, The Crow and all of that. It's because I have general anxiety disorder and other issues like that. So the best way my friend put it is all like, no, he writes scary stuff. It's like, why? Because he's afraid all the time. Like, oh yeah, no. I'm always like, you know. So that's why, but I like the horror and all that because I guess it's more comfortable to get in there with it than just be like, oh, it's like, okay, no, I'm gonna wait in here. Let's see what we got. Oh, okay, let's not be going into the deep end. But you know, took me a while to realize that. I just thought I was, you know, a 90s kid and all gothy. It's like, no, there's more to it than that.
And what about you, Hector? What's your favorite genre?
You know, I have to say horror, right? Horror, you know, it's my guilty pleasure go to. But, you know, of course, you know, neo-Westerns, you know, hey, obviously, right?
Yes.
You're saying El Paso Hero is a Western? No.
Technically neo-West, right?
Yes.
All right, so I'll close. Today, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Remember, if you're participating in the summer reading program, you can use the code COMICS21 to get credit for attending. I hope we've inspired you to start writing and start creating your own comic books. We will be posting this presentation on our YouTube channel in the next week. So please like our channel and turn on the notifications to get more great content from us. You can find these creators online at the addresses listed on the screen. We hope you join us Saturday at 2 p.m. On our YouTube channel for an interview with Kenny Keel. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.